Hi, my name is Miranda Kincaid, and the interest group I will talk about today is the American Bankers Association. Looking at the history of the ABA, they were organized after the economic panic of 1873 in order to unite and advocate for the interests of the banking industry as well as the people in the banking industry. Today, they're still active in lobbying, training, and continued education, as well as research and community investment. And the first action I will talk about that the interest group took was a friend of the court brief. This was in Burgess versus FDIC, which arose when a former bank CEO, Burgess, challenged an FDIC's enforcement action against him after he committed some type of wrongdoing while working at his bank. And this action imposed a monetary penalty but also a lifetime ban from the banking industry. This was all done through the FDIC's in-house administrative process instead of through a trial. And in the brief, the ABA claimed that the in-house enforcement process was unfair and led to a biased settlement. And they also said that this process denies banks and Burgess a constitutional right to a jury trial. And in the end, the FDIC did win the case, but they did try. So the second amicus curiae brief that I will talk about was in Cantero versus Bank of America. And this case arose when New York's state law required interest on mortgage escrow accounts. And they believe that this new law was preempted by the National Bank Act because they didn't require interest. But in the ABA file, they contended that state-imposed regulation on big banks significantly interfered with their lending powers and should not apply because of the national law. And in the end, Cantero did win. And then the final action I will talk about was a test case. This was the Bank Policy Institute versus the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. And this case was sponsored by several different interest groups and organizations, including the ABA, the Bank Policy Institute, and the Ohio Bankers League. And this case arose because the Federal Reserve put a new regulation into place kind of slowly, which required big banks to use stress tests to see how their capital levels would change in different adverse economic conditions. And the question was whether or not the Federal Reserve, their new framework, violated the Administrative Procedure Act, because that act requires agencies to use notice and comment rulemaking, meaning that they're supposed to get feedback from different people before they fully implement these regulations. And the ABA claimed in this case that the Fed was making laws, not just issuing guidance, and they weren't making the laws the correct way.